Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel. Today, I'm going to be counting down the top 15 best hard rock albums of 2023. Let's get started here with my number 15. I'm going to go with Rockology by Eric Carr. This was re-released this past Record Store Day. It's an excellent collection of Eric Carr solo recordings here. Of course, Eric Carr, drummer for KISS before his passing in 1991. He's a great drummer with a fantastic voice as well. I wish he would have done more work vocally with KISS during his tenure, but very underrated musician in my opinion, so I'm glad they reissued this. What they did here was repackage it to look more like the 1978 KISS solo album, so it just kind of matched the style here, which I thought was really cool. In addition to the album art, this is definitely, one of those records that if you're a hardcore KISS fan, it's a must-have in your collection, so I was really happy that, on Record Store Day I had the chance to pick up this copy here of Rockology. Was not hard to find, but I was able to track a copy down. I did unbox it here on the channel the next day, so definitely go ahead and check that one out. I'll leave it linked down in the comments section below, but, an awesome compilation here of some of Eric's solo works. I really enjoy it. There's just some great material on here, Eyes of Love, Somebody's Waiting, Just Can't Wait, Mad Dog, A Nightmare, Tiara, Can You Feel It, and a great cover of Obla Di, Obla Da by the Beatles. So, really great stuff here in my opinion. Very underrated was Eric Carr, the late great Eric Carr here, and they reissued Rockology. This was a release that was done, outside of KISS, but really, really strong stuff. That's a must-have for any KISS fan, so I wanted to put it on this list here, even though it was, technically a reissue. It's going to be my number 15 on the list. I wanted to count it here. It's definitely worth talking about. Going to go with Rockology by Eric Carr, the Record Store Day version. Coming in at number 14 now, let's go with Wrong Side of Paradise by Black Star Riders. Formed out of Thin Lizzy, Black Star Riders have been a really consistent yet underrated band over the past decade or so, right? 10 years after their first record, they released Wrong Side of Paradise. It's a fun album, in my opinion, with great rock and feel to it and some ferocious guitar work as well. Really killer stuff. Some of it is definitely reminiscent of Thin Lizzy as well, so I thoroughly enjoy this record, even though it's one of those albums that hasn't been talked about all that much this year, but wanted to include it here on this list anyway. Coming in at number 14, let's go with Wrong Side of Paradise by Black Star Riders. Following that up now with my number 13, let's go with Autumn, a rock opera in 3 acts by the Smashing Pumpkins. Parts 2 and 3 of their latest studio offering here, Autumn, a rock opera in 3 acts, were released in 2023, with Act 1 being released in November of last year. I really enjoy the concept here. I think it's a really great idea, to drop multiple installments of a concept record, sporadically, one at a time, and that kind of builds suspense to the next release. So I thought that was really cool. So I do dig the structure of this concept album here in all 3 acts. In my opinion, it's some of the best work the Smashing Pumpkins have done in many years as well. So, when it comes down to it, when, comparing all 3 acts, I do kind of prefer Act 3 to the rest of the record, but it's all great stuff in my opinion here. Definitely wanted to put it on this list, described by Billy Corgan as a successor to previous concept albums like Melancholy and The Infinite Sadness and Machina, The Machines of God, 2 great concept albums prior. So really interesting stuff here in my opinion. Love the songwriting, love the concept, and love the idea of dropping, 3 acts kind of individually. So with that said, my number 13 here on the list, going to go with Autumn, a rock opera in 3 acts by the Smashing Pumpkins. Number 12, how about Mammoth II by Mammoth WVH? For a sophomore studio effort here, Wolfgang Van Halen once again performs all of the instruments on this record, as well as leading on lead vocals here. This album reaffirms, in my opinion, what his debut set out to accomplish, and that's to, establish what a great player and musician he is, as well as, unfolding his vision for, what he wants to do as a solo artist. So I think that's really cool. I think his voice is really unique, and he's an amazing player. I saw Wolfgang Van Halen and Mammoth WVH live the day this album was released, actually, at MetLife Stadium, when they were opening for Metallica on the N72 tour, and I thought it was a great show, and the new tracks from this record really shined live, in my opinion. So, long story short, I went out a couple days later and bought this record. Some standout tracks here for me include Like a Pastime, Another Celebration at the End of the World, Miles Above Me, I'm Alright, Erase Me, Better Than You to close things out. Great stuff here by Wolfgang Van Halen on his second studio album, and he's just a musician that's going to continue to get better with time, in my opinion. For my number 11, I'm going to go with 3 by the Winery Dogs. Quite possibly the last Winery Dogs studio album for a while, now that Mike Portnoy is back as the drummer for Dream Theater. This is the follow-up to the 2017 EP Dog Years, and their first full-length studio album since 2015. There's so much talent in the Winery Dogs, and this record is pretty much what I expected from the band, right? You have killer drumming by Mike Portnoy, Portnoy throughout, and great guitar work and lead vocals from Richie Kotzen, who reminds me a lot of Chris Cornell in a lot of aspects. I think his voice sounds a lot like the second coming of Chris Cornell, which is very interesting. So, more great stuff here by the Winery Dogs. They're very underrated, but, real powerhouse of a supergroup in my opinion, and any year we get new material from them is a good year. So, some really solid stuff here on their third full-length studio album, and their first since 2015. Top 10 now, I'm going to go with Mirror to the Sky by YES. This was definitely a great year for progressive music in general, so I definitely wanted to put YES here and Mirror to the Sky in the top 10. It's a follow-up to The Quest from 2021, and definitely sounds like a throwback in some respects as the band no doubt draw inspiration here from some of their classic works, and yet it manages to sound new and fresh at the same time. I think Steve Howe's guitar work is still as sharp as ever, and some of my favorite songs from this record include Cut from the Stars, All Connected, Luminosity, and the 13-minute title track as well, and many more. I know YES, like a lot of mainstream prog bands, went through a period of, commercial success where they changed their sound to, better appeal to, the mainstream, but that's when they did their best known work. But for me personally, I think proggy YES is the best version of YES, which is another reason why I love this record here. Just some great prog rock here on display by, the progressive rock legends YES in 2023, so they get us started in the top 10. I'm going to go with Mirror to the Sky. At number 9, we have Chaos and the Color by Uriah Heep. British rock legends Uriah Heep are still making great music into their older age, so continuing what they started on Living the Dream from 2018, this album shows once again that this band still has more to offer in the studio and what's become a bit of a resurgence with 2 great studio albums in a row here. This is thoroughly enjoyable and a youthful sounding record throughout, in my opinion. The band sound great here, with some standout tracks being Save Me Tonight, Freedom to Be Free, Hail the Sunrise, One Nation, One Sun, and more. I think one of the more underrated and lesser talked about releases from, a legendary rock band this year, but great to see Uriah Heep still doing great things in the studio even now at this later stage in their careers. Number 8, Road by Alice Cooper. Just a fun album all around, and while I do think that Alice's best work is behind him at this point, he remains one of rock's most consistent performers, both on stage and in the studio here, and a new Alice Cooper record is always cause for celebration in my opinion. This album is also important because it marked the first time that his current touring band contributed to the songwriting process on a new studio album, so I think it's Alice's best in years as far as I'm concerned. Just fun rock and roll here, which has really become Alice's MO over the past, decade or so. And it's important to enjoy a showman like Alice Cooper while he's still here, because once he retires, there's not going to be, anybody that really comes and takes his place. He's one of those guys in rock and metal that's pretty irreplaceable. So Alice Cooper, an absolute legend here. Great to see new music from Alice in 2023. Got to go with Road here at number 8 on the list. Haken are a band that I don't think have ever made a bad studio album. They're a great blend of, progressive rock and metal, and definitely one of my favorite British hard rock and metal bands of the 21st century. So with that in mind, coming in at number 7 here, let's go with Fauna, their most recent studio album. A really interesting concept, too, as every song is assigned an animal, so a lot of thought went into the songwriting of this record, and I think multi-instrumentalist Richard Henshaw really shines here, so great musicianship throughout on this record, which is a huge part of what makes Haken a fantastic band and one to keep an eye on. Some standouts here include Nightingale, Elephants Never Forget, Eyes of Ebony, and Taurus as well. Great stuff here by Haken. Again, I don't think they've made a bad studio album up to this point, and Fauna is just a continuation of their great studio catalog up until now. So, great stuff here. Coming in at number 7, let's go with Fauna. Awesome prog release from 2023. At number 6, I'm going to go with In Time's New Roman by Queens of the Stone Age. The follow-up to Villains from 2017. Queens of the Stone Age returned to the studio for In Time's New Roman, and I just love the songwriting here on this record. I think the album has a great groove to it as well. While I don't think it's their best studio album, it's very solid, and some standouts here that I enjoy include Obscenery, Paper Machete, Emotion Sickness, and the 9-minute closer, Straight Jacket Fitting. So great stuff here by Queens of the Stone Age. Again, is it their best work? I don't think so. It's going to be hard to top some of their earlier stuff in my opinion, but at the end of the day, very solid stuff here and consistent stuff in the studio. Love the songwriting, like I had said. I think Josh Homme is a very talented songwriter who really shines again on this record. We break into the top 5 now with Rokflute by Jethro Tull. Prog legends Jethro Tull still have more left to offer, as seen on their most recent album here, Rokflute, my number 5 on the list, and I'll talk more about some of my favorite progressive rock and metal releases, and that's going to get its own video, because I've only really scratched the surface here of what came out in the world of prog this year, but I will be doing another video counting down my favorite progressive rock and metal albums of 2023 later on in this series. But one of my favorites for sure has to be Rokflute here by Tull. Ian Anderson's vocals, while they aren't what they used to be, I really enjoy his delivery here on this record on top of classic Tull instrumentation, and interestingly enough, this is the shortest gap in between Jethro Tull studio albums as the follow-up to the Zealot Gene from 2022, so it's great to see Tull, still kicking in the studio for 2 years in a row with 2 great albums in 2 years. So awesome stuff here by Jethro Tull, towards the end of their careers now, but still putting out some really solid studio work that I find to be, quite enjoyable and definitely one of the best prog releases of the year. At number 4, let's go with Starcatcher by Greta Van Fleet. I understand the comparisons between Greta Van Fleet and Led Zeppelin, but I always thought that they were a band, with their own identity. They were their own band, and so it was important that Starcatcher was a statement record that really solidified that. And needless to say, Greta Van Fleet are a band that are going to be major players in rock music for, years to come, and they followed up the Battle at Garden's Gate with a classic here, in my opinion, Starcatcher, that really does make a statement, like I had said, and really kind of separates them a bit from Led Zeppelin here as they begin to form their own identity with standout tracks like Faith of the Faithful, The Falling Sky, Meeting the Master, Sacred the Thread as well. I think it's their most consistent album yet, and they're a band that are just going to continue to improve as they, move on in their discography here. But I think it's a great album, like I said, a statement record, and really powerful stuff by Greta Van Fleet with Starcatcher this year. Definitely one of the best rock releases of 2023, coming in at number 4 on my list. Top 3 now, I'm going to go with Every Loser by Iggy Pop. At 76 years old, I did not expect Iggy Pop to have a top 3 rock album of the year, but he blew my expectations way out of the water with Every Loser. Iggy comes roaring back here with a fun, in-your-face, heavy, and crude record like only he can make. Some standouts here include Frenzy, Strung Out Johnny, New Atlantis, Modern Day Ripoff, Morning Show is great. Love the atmosphere of that track, right? That downtrodden delivery by Iggy Pop is fantastic. Neo-punk, All the Way Down, The Regency as well, produced by Andrew Watt. It's a great record here. I think it's Iggy's best in a long time. So, again, was not expecting at the beginning of this year to have, Iggy Pop in the top 3, come the end of the year in these year-end rankings. But lo and behold, he did some fantastic work this year with Every Loser that really does take you back to, the golden years of his discography, some of his work with the Stooges, and some of his great solo stuff as well. My 1 and 2 are really difficult because they're both very close together, but for different reasons. So, that said, my 1 and 2 are definitely a bit, interchangeable. I think they could change. You ask me again, maybe 2 months from now, could be different. But that said, coming in today at number 2, let's go with But Here We Are by the Foo Fighters. After the tragic passing of drummer Taylor Hawkins, the Foo Fighters returned to the studio here and released their most meaningful album yet. But Here We Are examines the band at their lowest point, still mourning the passing of Taylor with raw and powerful tracks like Rescued, Under You, Hearing Voices. The title track But Here We Are is really powerful and heavy. The Glass, Nothing at All, Show Me How, The Teacher as well, and Rest. Really emotional stuff. Rest reminds me a lot of the title track To Black Gives Way to Blue by Alice in Chains, so I found that to be very interesting here. It's a tremendous tribute to Taylor Hawkins, and again, I think it's their best studio album in quite some time, so definitely deserves to be at the top of this list here. Again, my 1 and 2 are really close together, so ask me on a different day, and this might be my number 1, but for today, my number 2 on the list has got to be But Here We Are by the Foo Fighters. And finally, coming in at number 1, let's go with Hackney Diamonds by the Rolling Stones. For the first time since 1969, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones both released new music in the same year, and who would have thought that the Stones at this stage in their careers would release an absolute classic like this one. This is definitely reminiscent of old school Rolling Stones here through and through, and this record features a lot of tracks I think, wouldn't sound out of place, on some of those classic 70s Stones studio albums. So with that in mind, some standouts here include Angry, Get Close, Depending on You, Bite My Head Off, Mess It Up, Live by the Sword is great, Tell Me Straight, great Keith Richards song, Sweet Sounds of Heaven is very bluesy, very soulful as well, and then of course to close things out, Rolling Stone Blues, great Muddy Waters cover. So a lot of tracks on here sound like they would have fit on those classic Stones records. So in examining this record here, it's great that they were able to draw influence from their classic works and still at this stage in their careers, at their age, be able to capture that same youthfulness and energy and really, turn it into something great in the studio. So I don't know what the Stones are going to do next in terms of their studio discography, if this is their last album or if they're going to continue on. But, if their next studio album is anything like this, that would be fantastic because this is just great stuff by the Stones that I don't think anyone was expecting to, go this hard. I definitely had some, decent-sized expectations for this record, but it blew my expectations out of the water. It's far better than anything they've done in decades, in my opinion. Probably their best album since, I don't know, Steel Wheels or so. Great stuff here, in my opinion, by the Stones with Hackney Diamonds. Mick Jagger sounds great. So does Keith Richards. And it's also the first studio album by the Stones following the death of Charlie Watts. But this album does feature some of his final studio contributions, which is very cool. And, the Stones are still kicking and still going to be delivering in 2024. They're going to be on tour, which is very exciting. I'll be seeing the Stones live for the second time, which is quite exciting as well. But awesome album. They're going to be touring here in Hackney Diamonds, my favorite rock album of 2023. Coming at number 1 here on the list. I gotta go with Hackney Diamonds by the Rolling Stones. So that wraps up my list here of the top 15 best rock albums of 2023, which you guys can see right over here. Very excited to, bring you guys a lot of these countdowns because this was a great year for rock and metal. So be sure to turn on notifications now so you don't miss any of those new uploads. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel down below if you've not already. It's greatly appreciated. And, let me know down in the comments section below. What are some of your favorite hard rock albums of 2023? I want to hear from you. And until next time, it's the CD guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.